Well, it was just a small little segment of San Rafael. Lincoln Avenue eventually became Highway 101. Not the freeway we know it today, but Lincoln Avenue itself was the freeway. It was a great neighborhood. We had many friends. We had a little old tennis court that we used to use for baseball, football, and all the activities. And I know people don't really believe me, I think, but when I tell them that we used to play hockey, skates, roller skates on 101 Highway in the evening. The pavement was so smooth, it was beautiful skating. The railroad, Northwestern Pacific, coming through San Rafael, as it left San Rafael up over the hill, was quite a grade that it had to climb to get out of San Rafael. And I always remember on Halloween night, there was some people, some boys I guess, would put grease on the tracks. And you knew it was coming. I think it was sometime in the evening, the trains came up that grade, and you could hear them chugging away, and all of a sudden you could begin chugging faster, and then it would stop. They just couldn't move. It wasn't very dangerous. It didn't hurt anything. They had to stop for, I guess, maybe half an hour or something to clean up the tracks. But this was the big joke on Halloween night, is they greased the railroad tracks. To get to school, we just walked over to Coleman School, which was nearby. And then as we went into Davidson and San Rafael High School, they had buses, and we'd walk over to Grand Avenue, about a half a mile away, and pick up the bus. And I enjoyed the bus riding because you got to know a lot of the young people that were going to school better. And it was an old, rickety old bus, though, I'll tell you, not the fancy buses that they have nowadays. But it got us to school and got us home, so it was great. When I was in the 5th or 6th grade, they had a play, King and I was the king and there was a queen. I forgot what the play was, but the lady that was the girl that was the queen, she was about my height. But by golly, when they dressed us up and put us on the production stage, they gave her high heels. So here I was looking up into the queen's eyes. For some reason, that got quite a laugh around the place. Well, it's interesting to look back because I never had the feeling that we were in a starving community. I don't remember people talking about food lines, although they did raise money to help people that were unfortunate. In this area, it was not depressing. I mean, you had enough money to live and eat. In the mid-Depression, 32 or 3, Franklin Roosevelt closed all the banks. And Dad came home that night to dinner and told us that the banks were closed. And very serious, because nobody knew exactly what was going to happen. People couldn't get along without banks, so they had to do something in a hurry. And they began reopening the banks fairly soon, and Dad's banks was one of the first banks to reopen. It was just a conservative. They had the liquidity they needed and background. So that worked out all right, and thank goodness that it did. As a boy, we got into Cub Scouting and then Boy Scouting. Cub Scouting in those days was not well organized like it is now. We were mostly an athletic association that seemed to be playing football and baseball. But nevertheless, we went through the certain steps. We started with a Troop 10, met in the attic of our church, Presbyterian church, and went to scout camp up in Cazadero. And I think one of the most memorable situations was that we were going back to, had planned to go back to a National Scout Jamboree in the East. And that was the year that polio struck. And that just stopped everything. And they called off this national camp right away. But the leaders from San Rafael decided that we would take a trip on our own. And so we went back and visited wonderful times in Washington, D.C. and New York City. It was very exciting. The things that come to mind are sort of funny. I remember going to Earl Carroll's Vanities on Broadway. We had to keep a scrapbook of our trip with pictures and notations, and then when we got home, we had the scrapbooks and a big dinner, and all the parents came down and saw what their sons had been doing. And I put this Earl Vanity's book in my scrapbook. And of course, the guys, the dads had a great time going through that book. Women were quite beautiful even in those days.